Hey, here are 5 stupid things I've noticed since last time. Richard Dawkins and his dumbass tweets. Recently on Twitter, Richard Dawkins used the examples of mild versus violent pedophilia and mild versus violent rape to argue that to judge one form of bad behavior as being worse than another form of bad behavior is not to endorse the less bad behavior, which is a perfectly valid and reasonable point to make. But given how commonplace rape apology is in our culture already, it's a shame that Dawkins didn't find a less needlessly agitative way of making that point. I don't think that Dawkins intended to minimize the seriousness of rape or pedophilia. I just think he's oblivious to how insensitive he's being and how fucking stupid he sounds. And this isn't the first time he's put his foot in his mouth when talking about sexual assault. And it's not the second time he's done that either. It's a good thing that I'm so good at compartmentalizing, because I can continue to admire Dawkins for being one of my guiding lights when I was first coming to terms with my atheism, while also wishing that someone close to him would do him and the rest of us a favor and just lose his fucking phone. New South Carolina teaching standards would undermine teaching of evolution. The South Carolina Board of Education is considering new teaching standards that would require biology teachers to remind students that scientific theories are subject to change with the finding of new information. Now, out of context, that doesn't sound all that bad. It sounds a little worse when you consider that this reminder is specifically to be given during the study of evolution. Supporters of these revised standards claim that this is just about teaching kids to think critically and be skeptical, and that would sound a lot more credible if these new standards were not being pushed by organizations like creationist think tank the Discovery Institute, which earned its reputation not by promoting skepticism, but by misrepresenting and undermining the very method of science itself. Federal court upholds Florida's physician gag rule. It's a common, though entirely understandable misconception that the state of Florida is a lawless swamp. In fact, Florida does have some laws. For instance, in Florida, where thanks to stand your ground laws, it is legal to murder someone because you think they might try to murder you first, it is illegal, in many cases, for physicians to discuss firearm safety with their patients. This law, which was signed in 2011 and of course was supported by the NRA, was recently upheld by a federal appeals court. So there you go. Florida, where physicians treating gun violence as a public health issue is not allowed, but preemptively shooting another person is. Evangelical Christianity's reigning #1 asshole. It's surprising I haven't mentioned this jackass before, isn't it? That there is Mark Driscoll, the founder and pastor of Seattle area megachurch Mars Hill, and current poster boy for evangelical Christianity at its most sexist and homophobic, Westboro Baptists notwithstanding. Lately, Driscoll's douchitude has been approaching critical mass as the revelation of extensive misogynistic and bigoted comments he posted to an online forum back in 2000 has compelled members of Mars Hill's advisory board to resign, former church members to organize protests, and from all indications, the backlash is only continuing to build. I'm sorry, I know that reveling in scandal like this is unseemly and crass, since many people say that they have truly been hurt by Driscoll's regressive teachings and allegedly abusive conduct as pastor at Mars Hill, but oh God, the schadenfreude, man, it is just too sweet to pass up. And to a more deserving guy, it could not happen. Superstition hampers response to Ebola outbreak. Response to the Ebola outbreak currently raging throughout Western Africa has been hobbled by overwhelmed facilities, insufficient manpower and funding, and a lack of effective treatments for the disease. But the most intractable enemy faced by physicians and aid workers might just be the superstitions that persist in many of the affected communities. Many of those at high risk for infection are choosing to ignore recommended precautions and turn instead to folk remedies and witch doctors, making the jobs of those determined to contain this, the largest Ebola outbreak in history, that much harder. It's a discouraging reminder that ignorance is just as pervasive and contagious as any virus, and in this case, might turn out to be just as deadly. The hardest part is only picking 5. Catch you next time.